Roxy's group, having arrived in Babylon, meets Northern. Northern explains the situation in Gallia to Roxy. He and his warriors have lost contact with the materials gathering squad in Gallia, and they are uncertain about the cause of this communication loss. The squad was headed towards a place called the Great Cliff. Upon hearing this, Roxy immediately instructs Myria to prepare. They are heading to Gallia to rescue the squad. Fate, having encountered Jade, visits Jade's sword workshop. He requests Jade to craft a scabbard for his sword. However, Jade lacks the materials needed for the scabbard and requires twilight stones for the job. Obtaining these stones has become challenging lately, with the royal army controlling their distribution. Greed then speaks to Fate, instructing him to find the stones himself. Jade informs Fate about the location of twilight stones, which he can obtain in Gallia. After Fate agrees to go, Jade hands him a map. The stones are located to the south, near the Great Cliff. In the midst of his journey, Fate, disguised as Mukuro, encounters an orc convoy. Fate orders Greed to transform into a shield crusher. Greed complies and transforms into a shield. Fate utilizes Greed as protection against the orcs' attacks, running and attacking them with a shield, easily defeating them. Roxy's group and Northern are also en route to the Great Cliff. Myria is frustrated because they cannot use a compass in that area, and the sky is covered with clouds, preventing them from determining directions by observing the stars and the moon. Roxy suggests following an orc horde as there is a note indicating the presence of an orc horde at the southern tip. If they head towards that location, they can get close to the Great Cliff. However, Roxy warns the others to be cautious due to the presence of crowned monsters around Gallia. As night falls, Fate decides to rest. He then talks with Greed, and a quarrel ensues. Fate instructs Greed to be silent, closing his eyes. He dreams and sees the surroundings. A girl appears in front of him, the core of the chimera he encountered earlier. The girl speaks, but Fate cannot hear her. Looking down, the place transforms into a pool of blood with many dead monsters. Hado and a bandit he had killed appear and pull Fate into the pool of blood. Fate struggles to escape but is already submerged. He then wakes up, startled by the dream. However, suddenly, monsters approach and Fate immediately rises. Fate searches for the direction of those monsters. Greed instructs him to use night vision. Fate's eyes turn green and he spots 4 salamanders approaching. Greed tells Fate to use black arrows. Fate transforms his sword into a bow, pulls it, and shoots an arrow at one of the salamanders, successfully killing it. However, Fate notices something odd about the other salamanders. They don't run or seek revenge for their fallen comrade. Greed speculates that they might be controlled by something. Fate decides to pursue the remaining salamanders. The salamanders reach Roxy and Northern's resting place. Northern and the guards rush to confront the salamanders. Roxy, awakened from her sleep, hurries outside. The salamanders spew fire, setting the area ablaze. Roxy tries to locate Northern, but is caught off guard. Mukin saves her from the salamander's fire breath. Myria, angered, decides to attack the salamander threatening Roxy. She draws the Flamberge magic sword and strikes the salamander's head. However, her attack is ineffective and she gets hit in return. Roxy approaches the fallen Myria. The salamander attempts to devour them both, but suddenly, Mukuro arrives and attacks the salamander with his sword. He transforms the sword into a shield to withstand the incoming flames and then turns it back into a sword, rushing towards the approaching salamander. Mukuro attacks the salamander with his sword. After defeating the salamander, Mukuro looks toward the group. Roxy and the others approach to express their gratitude. Mukuro also tells Myria to thank him, but she refuses. Mukin introduces himself and encourages Myria to thank Mukuro. Northern, appearing on the scene, also thanks Mukuro. Mukuro doesn't mind and asks about the mark on the salamander's body. Roxy and the others inspect and find the same mark on the other salamanders. They find the situation suspicious. Crowned monsters like salamanders usually don't form groups. Myria speculates that the salamanders might be targeting Roxy. They are unaware of the events in Gallia, especially since the Holy Dragon left its nest. Mukuro and Roxy's group arrive at the Great Cliff. Mukuro expresses gratitude for Roxy's assistance. Myria instructs Roxy to quickly go and find the materials collecting team. Before leaving, Roxy wants to shake hands with Mukuro, but Myria intervenes, holding Mukuro's hand. Fate's unintentionally activated telepathic ability allows him to read Myria's thoughts. Myria mocks Mukuro, calling him a skull-masked insect. Roxy apologizes and tells Myria to leave. After Myria refers to him as an insect, Greed teases Fate. Fate instructs Greed to be silent. In the daytime, Fate descends the hill, takes a deep breath, and feels the exceptionally fresh air in that place. The area might have been purified or affected by past battles. Fate walks along the bottom of the cliff and observes stone-like monsters. He scans the surroundings, attempting to find twilight stones. These stones are transparent, colorless, and emit a faint purple light. Although Fate doesn't find any Twilight Stones, he spots a woman in the distance. The woman is looking at something. Fate approaches and sees that the woman is Eris. Shortly after, Eris leaves. Fate follows her, but loses track of Eris. Greed tells Fate to look behind him. A chimera is there, but it remains motionless. Greed speculates that it's a prototype since the chimera lacks a core. The creature was buried by stones during a past battle, and now the stones covering it have collapsed. Fate notices 3 fallen stones beside the chimera and suspects that 3 chimeras emerged from them. Suddenly, an attack comes from the direction of Roxy's group. Fate hurries to join them. Roxy dodges the incoming attacks and falls. Miria rushes to Roxy's side, attempting to protect her with her sword. The 3 chimeras attack Miria with laser beams. 2 shots miss, but one nearly hits Miria. Mukin runs and pushes Miria, taking the hit and falling. Northern also struggles to evade the chimera's laser attacks. One chimera prepares to shoot lasers at Roxy again, but Mukuro arrives and attacks the chimera with his arrows. He lands and assaults another chimera. Then, he inquires about Roxy and the other's well-being. Mukuro observes the wound he inflicted on the chimera. The wounds regenerate, but the regeneration is slower than Haniel's. Mukuro explains the chimera's weakness to Roxy and the others, instructing them to attack the monster on its chest. The creature there is the core of the chimera. Fate and Roxy run towards the chimera. The chimera attacks, causing the area to catch fire. The chimera uses its hand to shield its chest. Fate runs through the flames and attacks the chimera's legs with his sword. The creature falls as it struggles to maintain balance. Roxy runs from behind and attacks the core on the chimera's chest using the Aaron sword technique, successfully destroying the monster. Another chimera attacks Miria with a burst of fire. Miria directs her sword forward, countering the chimera's flames with her flamberge fire. Fate and Greed are impressed by Miria's skills. Mukuro approaches and instructs Miria to hand the chimera over to him. Miria is irritated that Mukuro is trying to save her again, but she eventually thanks Mukuro. Roxy approaches Miria and tells her to lead everyone to a safe place, while she and Mukuro will confront the remaining chimera. The chimera attacks with another burst of fire. Mukuro and Roxy run towards the chimera, holding their swords. Mukuro transforms his sword into a scythe, using it to cut through the chimera's flames. Then Roxy leaps and attacks the core on the chimera's chest. Together, they successfully defeat the chimera. Now, only one chimera remains to be defeated. Mukuro asks Roxy if she's okay. The chimera attacks Roxy and Mukuro again with another burst of fire. Both of them easily evade the attack. Then, the chimera leaves. They plan to attack the chimera once it lands. However, the chimera's landing causes the surrounding ground to crack. Mukuro, Roxy, and the chimera fall into the fissure. Mukuro embraces Roxy, attempting to protect her before the fall. Mukuro lies there and then opens his eyes. He gets up and looks around. He gazes forward and is surprised to see Roxy. He forgot that he fell together with Roxy. He loses his mask and searches around. The mask is beside Roxy's foot. Shortly after, Roxy wakes up. Fate quickly retrieves his mask. He doesn't want his identity to be revealed. Roxy asks for a break before heading back up. Mukuro conjures fire to illuminate the place. Then, Mukuro thinks of something. They could defeat the chimera if the ground hadn't collapsed. Mukuro inquires about the missing materials collecting team from Roxy. Roxy responds that she and the others failed to save the team. Roxy asks who informed Mukuro about the chimera. Mukuro replies that he learned about the chimera from survivors from Gallia. Roxy interrogates Mukuro out of curiosity. She asks if the survivor is a girl with a big axe and if she's the one who attacked Babylon's leader. Roxy has also heard rumors about the girl traveling with a masked man. Then Roxy stares intently at Mukuro's face. After that, Mukuro confesses to Roxy. Roxy is pleased with Mukuro's answer. Roxy recalls someone when looking at Mukuro. That person should be in the capital right now, but Roxy feels like that person is right next to her. Roxy worries after parting ways with that person and wonders if they are happy. Mukuro then responds to Roxy's words. He tells Roxy that the person must be happy, fortunate to have someone like Roxy caring so much for them. Out of the blue, Mukuro's right eye turns red. He winces and closes his right eye, then swiftly gets up and distances himself from Roxy, sensing an impending threat. The chimera that fell alongside him emerges from behind. Mukuro transforms his sword into a scythe. The chimera launches a fire attack, but Mukuro effortlessly evades the assault. He jumps toward the chimera and swings his scythe, unleashing a series of attacks at the monster's chest. The chimera falls, and Mukuro ceases his assault. Reverting his scythe back into a sword, he notices a mark on the monster's head, reminiscent of the salamander earlier. Mukuro suspects that someone is targeting Roxy and deduces it to be Eris. Roxy approaches Mukuro, and he reassures her not to worry about the chimera. Suddenly, rocks above Roxy begin to vibrate and fall. Roxy transforms her sword into a shield, protecting herself from the descending rocks. They inspect the fallen rocks and are astonished to find a twilight stone before them, formed from crystallized monsters. Mukuro regrets not being aware of this earlier. Afterward, they both climb back up. Miria and the others are already waiting. Miria runs and embraces Roxy, expressing her joy at Roxy's survival. Roxy is equally delighted that Miria and the others have made it through. In another location, a cloaked man is strolling. The man dons a skull mask, has yellow hair, and possesses unsettling eyes.